Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Steve from BOHS. We're the Chartered Society for Worker Health Protection. It's an honour for me to present at this British Safety Council conference alongside eminent and experienced people who've already spoken to you. I'm privileged to lead an organisation with a title that probably confuses you. We represent the scientific professionals who strive to protect the health of Britain's workers through this discipline of occupational hygiene. And I hope by the end of today, you've heard the word hygiene mentioned a few times, nobody will leave this room thinking it's to do with washing hands, food safety, or brushing your teeth. It's all about stopping you getting cancer and lung disease, okay? So if I can get that out of the way first. And I'm going to make no apologies for referring back to some of the statistics, because I think we need to ram these statistics home in the UK at all levels. So I'm going to repeat some of the stuff that Lawrence has talked about, Karen has talked about, and Leslie has talked about. And I will explain what hygiene is, but you'll have to wait a bit for that. I'd like to begin with a statement. You might notice my title. The title I refer to is different from this one. I'm afraid house-moving timescales are no respecter of presentation preparation plans. So all British Safety Council notices. So it has changed. My statement is, I hope it's one you can all agree with, prevention is better than cure. And I want to ask, what sort of health are we trying to push up the agenda? Because words are important and words mean things. But I want to begin, oh, there you go, they actually popped it in, thank you very much. I want to begin by talking about the great strides British industry has made in improving safety over the years, and for which the UK is rightly respected around the world. And by any measure you choose, safety for performance has improved. That's something politicians and newspapers would do well to remember. Here's a slide that I borrowed from the Health and Safety Laboratory up in sunny Buxton. It shows a consistent decrease in the number of fatal accidents at work over the last century. This is going back to 1900 over here on the left. The trend is significantly and consistently down. We used to kill about 5,000 people every year from accidents in the workplace. We're now down to under 150 today. Obviously, that's 150 too many, but that's a huge decrease over the last century. Some of that is due to improvements in technology and changes in our mix of industries, as you'd probably guess. However, the experts tell me that a significant proportion of the decrease is directly attributable to the development of our occupational health and safety system in the UK. That's something that should be celebrated. The efforts of regulators, professionals, businesses, unions, everybody's done a fantastic job. Whilst this downward trend is to be applauded, I'm afraid that we can't say the same thing for the health of our workers. There have undoubtedly been some improvements in occupational health, but nothing that's anywhere near as significant as safety. In fact, the HSE, as I understand it, only started issuing estimates of the number of ill health deaths in about 2010. I say estimates as it's much more difficult to count deaths through ill health. That's why Leslie does epidemiology. We have to estimate these things. We can't put names to the bodies. It's not so personal. These are the people who die in hospitals or at home after a long and usually very painful illness. They don't die in the workplace that gave them the illness. They're not on our books. The latest figures, as Karen mentioned, show that 13,000 people die from work-related ill health every year. I think while you've been here this morning, 3 people have died. By the time we get to lunchtime, it'll be 6. By this time tomorrow, it'll be 36. Just imagine if 36 people died in one day in an occupational accident. What would happen in the media? 13,000 deaths every year. That means the deaths caused by accidents represent only 1% of the total deaths caused by work. 99% of occupational mortality is attributable to disease. Okay, Steve, that's fine, but let me tell you this. This is all caused by long past exposures. It's granddad's disease, isn't it? It's not relevant today. Well, I wish that was the case. We need to look at the morbidity statistics. For potentially life-threatening physical occupational diseases, there are 13,500 new cases of occupational cancer each year, as Leslie pointed out to us. 8,500 new cases of respiratory disease, like COPD, asthma, things like that. For debilitating physical occupational illnesses, There are 20,000 new cases every year of noise-induced hearing loss, 35,000 new cases every year of occupational skin disease, 141,000 new cases every year of musculoskeletal disorders, and hundreds of thousands of hand-arm vibration issues. Quite apart from this sort of appalling social cost to all of this, which individuals and families bear, businesses generally don't bear this cost, the UK pays a steep economic price. But it's the UK as a whole. You know, that's the trouble. It's not in our budget. It's hidden in the UK's overall budget. The HSE estimates ill health and disease cost over 8 billion. And it was interesting. I noted Clarence said double figures for the billions now because they're working on estimates for the cancers as well, which will push it well over the 8. Let me use a real example to ground this in a real business setting. Now, in order to use this example, it's been simplified and, as you will see, anonymised. Nevertheless, I hope the story is going to resonate with you. This is a graph of one company's lost time accidents over time. As you can see, the company drove down the number of accidents and hit their target of 0 lost time accidents. What's more, they maintained this standard for 3 consecutive years. This is something they can be rightly proud of. Changes like this don't just happen by themselves. It represents a significant achievement by the company, its workers, suppliers, and even its customers. They should be congratulated. Safety professionals are doing a good job. But if it looks so good, why have I had to anonymise the data? Well, here's another graph. This one covers the same time period, but this time we've plotted the average exposures to a substance that the company uses. Anonymity prevents me from naming the substance, but I can say the company uses a lot of it. It forms a significant part of their production process, and a lot of their workforce are exposed to it. As you can see, the company has not significantly reduced exposures to this substance over time. If I had a line which shows where the workplace exposure limit is, the blue line, the well, you can see the exposures are also quite high. If I tell you that the exposure limit in other countries is about half what it is in the UK, you might start to become concerned. You may well be aware of similar situations yourselves. I think we're all now realising that health has not enjoyed the same level of continuous improvement as safety. So, this is where I hope I might provoke you a little bit. Next question I want to ask is, how did we get into this situation? I think by attempting to answer that, we might shed some light on what we need to do next. Well, to turn a phrase back on itself, the simple answer is, we put safety first. We concentrated on it and we did it before health. And that was probably the right thing to do, in all truth. In the past, there were so many acute injuries and fatalities. You remember, 5,000 a year, a century ago? There's so many of those occurring that it made sense to tackle those first. And health, as Lawrence pointed out, has always been harder. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm in no way saying safety is easy. The gains that have been made in safety are enormous and something we should be proud of. These gains have been hard fought, and I'm sure that most safety professionals will have had times when you've felt like you're banging your head against a brick wall. But I am saying that at many levels, safety is easier than health. Safety hazards are easier to visualise and appreciate. You can think about falling off a ladder and visualise it much more easily than the harm caused by exposure to gases and vapours. Safety risks are often easier to control. The probabilistic nature of safety risks means many controls, such as machine guarding, are absolute, or can be absolute. The deterministic nature of health hazards, where exposure has to be quantified and minimised, means that risk can rarely be eliminated and just usually reduced. Many safety risks can be controlled using the same or similar measures, whereas a one-size-fits-all approach does not work for health risks, where bespoke controls are often needed. Now, in industry today, what gets measured gets done. Safety key performance indicators are relatively easy to define. Targets like 0 accidents, whether they're realistic or aspirational, they're easy to understand. Health risks tend to have a long latency, a significant time gap between being exposed and the onset of disease, even some 40 years with mesothelioma, as Leslie pointed out. That makes KPIs for health much harder to set. But they do need to focus not on the ultimate outcome, therefore, but on indicators which influence the outcome. Clearly, then, one of the solutions going forward is going to be setting effective KPIs. The broad nature of health hazards, complex language that comes with them, and perhaps the sheer volume of work means it can be overwhelming. In the past, this has led to too much of a focus on gathering paperwork, collecting data sheets, and filling out forms, all of which can create the impression of improvement when, in fact, what's really going on is just documenting the status quo. Worse still, controls have been put in place and have gone untested and unchallenged. Those that have been tested are often found wanting, and improvements require someone to understand what is required and to take ownership of it. Add to this the fact that there aren't many quick fixes, and it's easy to see why health improvements are given a lower priority. It's hard. Admitting that we've found it overwhelming, though, is the first stage to finding a solution. When it comes to health, historically, we've looked at the situation like this, and I'm afraid this is going to turn out to be remarkably similar to Lawrence's 3-pink column diagram that we saw earlier. There's been no collaboration beforehand, I can assure you. If you put a continuum between consequences and prevention on one side, occupational hygiene over here was associated with prevention, straightforward, anticipating, recognising, evaluating and controlling health hazards, and adopting a hierarchy of control measures to prevent ill health. On the consequences side, we have primary care, surveillance, monitoring. We know what those things are. But this is in fact a simplistic and old-fashioned view, as Lawrence pointed out. The role of health in the workplace has expanded as organisations have put more effort into the wellbeing agenda. There are going to be quite a few people talking about wellbeing today, and that's a good thing. Bringing public health issues into the workplace has benefits, both for the employee and the employer, not least an economic one, as I'm sure if you're a person working in business, you'll know. But to return to my original question, what sort of health are we pushing up the workplace agenda? As we once made great gains in safety, so now we're starting to make gains in well-being. But this cannot be at the expense of real workplace health risks, which, as we have seen, lie at the heart of the huge social and economic burden of occupational disease in this country. And by the way, are part of an employer's legal duty to manage. Let's be clear. Addressing workers' lifestyle modifiable factors of diet, alcohol, exercise and smoking is important, but it won't stop you getting silicosis. It won't stop you getting cancer. However, as Lawrence showed us, it can work really positively alongside effective exposure control. And they demonstrated that on the Olympic Park construction project. An integrated approach to occupational health covering medicine, hygiene and well-being would really be a fantastic partnership if we could make that work. So where do we go from here? And I'll be as quick as I can. Well, I hope that in outlining some of the issues, we might start to see some of the solutions. We need to begin with a change in our focus and embrace, as Lawrence said, health like safety. While zero accidents is a laudable goal, zero harm would be a better one. Like all change, this is going to have to be led from the top. Health risk management can't just be boiled down to simple toolkits and checklists. Controlling exposures to chemical, physical and biological agents requires comprehensive, robust risk assessments carried out by competent people. Accurate risk assessments that look at the individual situation and propose the most effective control measures. Next, there needs to be an acceptance, ownership and implementation of those controls identified in the assessment. With this needs to come an acceptance that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work in a lot of cases. This means becoming actively involved in the selection of control measures, understanding how they work, challenging their performance and adapting them to specific situations. We need behavioural safety programmes to become behavioural health and safety programmes. Just as the assessments need more understanding, so employees are going to need more training. Now, whilst the one-size-fits-all approach won't work, we still need to work hard at developing simple key performance indicators, which are going to help us monitor and drive reductions in exposure and consequent improvements in health. What gets measured gets done. As well as analysing near misses, the accidents that don't happen, we should be developing KPIs for the exposures which are happening now. Lastly, we need to objectively review the assessments and the control measures that are put in place. I'm sure many of you will have seen installations of expensive LEV systems, for example, that actually have little or no effect in reducing the exposure they were meant to control, because it was great tin bashing, but nobody thought about how you do the extraction and where you put the hood and what the velocities are. And I'm not a hygienist, but I learn these things and I see them in workplaces and I just find it shocking. Reviewing means demonstrating that control measures work, that they actually reduce exposures and not just create the impression of improvement. So, here's a quick plug. Where do we come in? Well, it will come as no surprise to you that I think occupational hygiene can help at each stage of this process. Hygienists are scientifically trained to provide accurate assessment and effective control of workplace health risks in a holistic, cost-effective and proportionate manner. As a chartered professional body for hygiene in the UK, we recognise our wider role in supporting all those involved in worker health protection. That's why we've always been a multidisciplinary learning body open to anyone with an interest in the subject. So, what's the future for health? Well, we know, certainly, no one organisation can tackle this alone. That's why we're proud to work with British Safety Council, the HSE, businesses and a full range of other UK health and safety bodies to strive towards preventing occupational illness and disease. It's a national problem that's gone under the radar for too long. I began by showing you how our safety record has improved over the last century. If we work together and apply the steps that I've outlined, it will mean in the future that we could see a chart like this for health. Let's just make sure we don't wait another 100 years before we take decisive action. Thank you.